Reflections with theologian Father James Basic, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo, Ohio.
One of the great theological themes we've had lately is that idea of not splitting the sacred and the secular, of living in one graced world, of one spirit surrounding all of us, of God's love encompassing us, and so that there isn't some naturally good thing we do over here and some supernaturally good thing in church, but that those two things go together. That kind of theological understanding, I think, really helps us, and we probably have to keep coming back to that. It's one of the great advances, I think, of our own time.
Joining Father Basic in today's reflections is Bishop James Hoffman, who is Bishop of the Diocese of Toledo. Today, Father Basic and Bishop Hoffman discuss In Search of the Lay Spirituality. Here's Father Basic.
Bishop Hoffman, I'm glad to have the chance to speak with you on this program. I think it's extremely kind of you to take time out of your schedule to be with me here. I'm thinking of a time when you and I were together before at a major conference on the laity at University of Notre Dame back a few months ago. And to me, it was a really impressive event, and I know that you ended up reporting to the whole body of bishops on that conference. And I was wondering if we couldn't talk a bit about that conference. And how did your report go to the whole group of bishops, by the way?
Well, I was surprised. It was well received. As a matter of fact, a number of them came up afterwards and asked for copies, which I had not anticipated, because at that particular national meeting there were a lot of other more significant items, including conference priorities and Hispanic pastoral. So not only that, we've been pleased with some of the developments since that time, and the interest in the tapes and the various presentations that were made.
We probably should say just a little bit more about that conference. We really had there, about 60 or 70 members of the laity from around the United States, people who were in general quite well educated and I suppose successful in a worldly sense, and people who brought really a deep sense of faith to the conference, but not necessarily people who were very involved in church structures.
Correct. They were the kind of people that you probably would not find at the ordinary parish meeting or serving in the parish council, simply because of other demands placed upon them because of the work they do. I think the origin of the consultation might be of some interest. When the bishops developed the statement Called and Gifted, the American Catholic Laity, some years ago, we became very aware of a tension that was occurring in regard to lay people and lay ministry. Many of our people were being drawn into church ministry. They were becoming lectors, and they were being distributors of the Eucharist, and just many of those aspects. And that was given a lot of approval. On the other hand, this important work of shaping the world, of building the kingdom, seemed to be undervalued. And we were very conscious of that because of the Chicago Declaration. Some lay people in the greater Chicago area noticed what was happening since the council, that many good laity were being moved into to works of service within the church, within the parish. And in contrast to what was going on before the council, there did not seem to be as much interest in affirming the lay people who were involved in very important work in the world and making it a better place to live and all of that.
I think the conference proved to be a most valuable experience for me, I know, and I know you did a lot of listening. That's one of the things you do really well, and you had to do a lot there, along with, how many were there, 6 other bishops, I think, there with you?
The other members of the committee.
Most of us sat around listening that whole time, and it's remarkable what you can learn that way, isn't it, when people are given sort of space and time. One thing I was impressed with is that the people did not hold back. If they had a gripe or a criticism or something, they really spoke out, and I think they wanted the bishops to hear all of that.
I think once they got beyond those stages of sharing with us their hurts and their disappointments, and I recall that focused upon their children, which one would expect would be a great concern for lay people, and their desire that the next generation should be able to receive the same values and way of looking at life that they had, and they weren't sure that was happening. They also were very critical of parishes, parish liturgy, and sometimes the lack of support that they, as people working in the world, just didn't experience in the parish community. Of course, you may remember there were a couple of people there who had been transferred. I remember one who was the dean of a very well-known teachers' college in the United States. When he moved from where he had been working before to his new position, he searches out a personal community. He finds that so important in his work that it be influenced and inspired by the worship relationship that he has with other believers.
Yeah, I did run into that fellow. Very impressive indeed. And I suppose typical of what a lot of people do. I don't know that we want to celebrate that as the best way of going about it, but he did indeed say that, and others are doing that, sort of searching out a place to worship, a parish that fits their own needs and so on. I suppose a lot of times we'd like to think of lay people staying with their parishes and trying to improve them and so on. I know when we're sending young people out of our Newman centers and our university parishes, that's one of the things we try to stress with them is in going back to your parishes, you know, the optimum kind of situation, the best you could do would be to get in there, and if you don't like what's going on, to try to work with others and with the pastor to improve it and so on. But I think that what happens is many people don't have the energy to do that, and therefore they will search out some sort of a parish that fits their own needs and has a liturgical style that they're used to and so on.
Sure. My sense among the participants was that we had both. We had those who, while they give all their energy to their work life, in fact, they would be good people to have as members of a parish because of their vision, of their sense of spirituality, of their faith, and sacramental convictions.
Definitely true. You mentioned the word spirituality, and I think that would be good for us to talk a little bit about that and to focus our attention on that, what we might call a spirituality of the laity today. A spirituality perhaps that it really has touches into many people in the church. Many people aren't too thrilled with that word laity, but I don't mean it in any pejorative sense. I mean the people of God, the people who are the members of the church, and in a sense what we learn from one another, and this probably helps to work out a common spirituality. I'm finding a lot of my spiritual direction, like with priests and nuns, ends up being influenced by my interactions with the lay people, because a lot of times the spirituality the lay people are developing really has applications to priests and sisters who are serving in parishes. I know I was down at one of our seminaries not long ago giving a series of talks to seminarians, and it happened to be run by a religious order, and I said that it seemed to me that the spirituality of the diocesan priests that were being trained there would be more closely aligned with the spirituality of lay people than the monastic spirituality that they were experiencing in that setup. And so I think there's a real commonness about this. And I don't think it's just a Catholic concern in any way, because obviously people of all religious traditions are trying to mine the riches of their heritage, of trying to find a way to live it out in their own world. And especially I think that idea of seeing how it applies to work, to one's activities in the world.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that strikes me as I reflect upon how one labels spirituality, whether it be monastic or priestly or laity, is I always find as one of the starting points whatever one's call, whatever one's duty of state of life happens to be. And so I think the call and the responsibilities of those who choose marriage is different from those who choose to be single. I think the call of those who place themselves under vows is different from the diocesan priest. So I agree. I think the word lay spirituality only tries to give us a sort of a ballpark within which we're dealing. On the other hand, you've also made the point that everybody who's a believer will have some commonality in regard to what comprises the spirituality. I like your care in making some of those distinctions, because if a person who spends 10 hours a day in a corporate job, and they're going to end up making a difference in regard to maybe the direction of the corporation or maybe a relationship with the third world, I just think that has to be cherished. And I would hate to see that man or woman try to model some monastic spirituality. Frankly, it's not going to be able to be done. if they try to do it, I think they would end up being disillusioned and perhaps burdened with guilt. They're much better to place the foundation of how they relate to the Lord Jesus Christ and with their brothers and sisters around what their particular precise call in life is.
I think that's such a helpful notion to keep in front of people, and I think it's one that has to be repeated over and over, because I think there is the tendency among people who are more closely tied with the institutional church and sort of work inside of that to expect everyone else to be that closely tied. I suspect there's a lot of lay people who hear preaching that makes them feel guilty if they're not explicitly involved in a parish council or a liturgy committee or some intramural activity of the parish. And I really think that's a mistake on the part of the clergy or lay leaders within the parish, because I think perhaps they're giving that signal even more than bishops and priests are giving it sometime. Like, hey, what's wrong with you? You haven't shown up for this meeting or something else in the parish. I find a lot of those people who don't show up like that are tremendous people, faith-filled people who are simply living the gospel out someplace else, in their family, by being a member of the Red Cross, doing civic activities, or especially, as you indicated, at their job, at what their work is in life. So I really think we have to be careful not to place some sort of new guilt trip on these people because they're not following along this other model of great involvement within the parish itself.
Mm-hmm. I think that as I listen, one of the things that occurs to me is relative to the whole notion or theology of work. I think that may be very underdeveloped. I think we sensed a bit of that at the consultation, that people felt that maybe it was so incomplete that more reflection needs to be done. For an example, I suspect there would be some people listening to us who have very negative notions about work, as though work is something to be avoided. If one can get out of work, that seems to be the thing. On the other hand, hopefully, there are those who are listening who understand that when they work, their work is good, and the work that they do helps to build the kingdom. In other words, it has a very clear, in my judgment, spiritual dimension. And Pope John Paul, in the encyclical on work, Laborum Exercens, makes the point that we're involved in our work in an effort of co-creation. That really the shape of the world, the environment, the city, the community, whatever, becomes in some fashion the work of our hands. I remember using the word transforming at that consultation, transforming society, and I was sort of challenged on that, as I remember, by the keynote speaker, because that may not seem to be the thrust of what we're about. But I think the theology of work.
Yes, I think I have a number of comments I want to make on that, and maybe we stay with that just a minute. The one is that that there's another side to the work thing, of course, which you indicated, and that is that most people don't experience their work in the United States as being that thrilling and exciting. I often talk about this on a sort of a continuum. For some people, their job or whatever they do in life is toil. You know, it's something they're watching their watch to see when they can get away from it and so on. At the other extreme, you have something that we call, I think, vocation, which can occur to a mother of a family, to a doctor, to a person who's laboring with his hands, that where it's sort of all-consuming, where they don't look at their watch at all, where they find their enjoyment in all of that. And I think as we analyze this whole theology of work, we have to keep that in mind. And I realize you did suggest that, and I think it needs to be highlighted, though, because I think the majority of people are thinking of it as toil and not as vocation or as work in this positive sense. The other thing that strikes me about it is the fulfilling out of that theology of work is that what work does for us. It's great we build the kingdom and try to create the community of love, and I think that does happen in really concrete ways. I mean, the mother doing the work in the home, creating the community of love there as best she can, for example, or the person on the assembly line who just is nice to the other people there, or takes an interest in the people he's working with, and in the lunchroom tries to have some decent conversation and so on. It seems to me that all those little ways we're spreading this kingdom of love. The other thing that it does for us, it seems to me, is that it actualizes us. It's our way of getting drawn out of our laziness, our selfishness. It's our way of developing our talents and skills. And I think almost everybody can think of their jobs that way, as being an opportunity to learn something, even if nothing else than interaction with human beings, good psychology about how people deal with things, or other people going back to school for retraining these days. So I think that our work has this great capacity to get us outside of ourselves. It's so easy to get turned in and to get selfish and to get our little problems become big, and work draws us out of that. And the Pope, I think, in that encyclical did a marvelous job of balancing, or not balancing, but bringing out both sides of that, building the kingdom and of improving and actualizing ourselves through our work.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the other thing that struck me, as you can tell, I'm off and running on this, but the other thing is the need to sort of keep in mind this when we're building the kingdom and so on, that that is has its own meaning within itself, and that we want to stay in touch with that. You've made that point before, I think, that it precisely is what draws us out of ourselves. It has a very specific kind of call to us, a character to us, and that's what I think we need to respond to wherever we find ourselves in life. That is what we talk about that theologically as being the call of the Lord, don't we? As God speaking to us precisely in and through the circumstances of the work site, of the particular people that are involved there. An example comes to me of that we heard at the conference, which I'll just share and then be quiet again for a minute. And that is the doctor we heard from the burn unit, I think in a Cleveland hospital, who was dealing with these terribly scarred people physically, and found out that psychologically they had so many problems. They would strike out at the doctors and the nurses. Their pain was terrible, and they felt disfigured inside and so on, and that they had to figure out what to do about that. And the common thing for doctors very often to do in that situation is to build walls and take care of the body and don't interact personally. And there would be a great temptation, as the doctor told us, to do that. But his faith threw him in another direction, and his faith said, no, let's respond to these psychological, emotional, religious needs. So he formed this unit, burn unit, of pastoral care on his own, not with a chaplain or anything, but with the nurses, the other doctors he worked with, so that they would treat the whole person psychologically, emotionally, and in a way spiritually. In fact, this group prayed together and had common goals. And what was their, I'm not going to remember their thing, love without sentimentality, and
compassion without pity, I think.
Yes, I think that's it, yeah. Anyway, isn't that an example?
Sure it is. As I listen to the reflection, I think what we sometimes experience are people who completely dichotomize the two. You know, they have spirituality over here, and they handle that maybe in the evening and on weekends, and perhaps particularly in our tradition at Eucharist on Sunday, and then they have the rest of their life sort of over somewhere else. What this doctor, for example, had done was that he had integrated work and spirituality. And I'm sure, in view of some of the other examples that you gave, that isn't always automatic, but I think it's very important that be suggested, that we realize that we have only one life. We don't have a human life and then a spiritual life or something, but we have one life we live, and it usually is encompassed with some particular task or work, and we try to spiritualize the whole reality. And I think it brings a kind of a wholesomeness, a kind of a, even when the work is difficult or great pressure, I think you can bring to bear some of those spiritual values. On the other hand, I think when you go to worship, and particularly if you're involved in satisfying work, what a spirit of gratitude as we celebrate the mysteries.
So important, yeah. You know, I'm thinking of that book by Studs Terkel, Work, he called it, Working, and I don't remember if it was Work or Working, but the point of it was that he interviewed all these people about their work, and what I noticed about it was that some people would be doing exactly the same work, And one would find it deadening, terrible, a drudgery, couldn't wait to get out of there. And another person would find a way to transform that same thing. I remember reading about a waitress in there. Now, my sister has told me in doing waitress work that she found it rather demeaning. People didn't really interact with you at a very personal level and so on, and she wasn't thrilled with that. But I read about a waitress in there who saw it as an art form. She saw it as a psychological challenge, how to deal with these people. The setting of the table was extremely important to her, creating the right atmosphere. And for her, the work was interesting. And for many people find that, to be drudgery or toil or even, I suppose, some, as I said, demeaning. And here was an example to me of how perspective could move in the direction that you suggested there, just by the way you come at it.
I suspect that both of us have gone to restaurants where we felt on the one hand, that the waitress really came to provide us with an enjoyable evening, and on the other hand, we went to another restaurant and we knew that the waitress was there because she needed a second income, or the family needed a second income. So I think there are different perspectives to it.
And people could, that same waitress could come to church and see the priest and say, this priest is here, somehow out of duty, or he's going through a routine, a motion is nothing. And she'd come to another church and find some priest there, or clergyman, minister, rabbi, that was saying just the opposite, that was welcoming and into it and so on. So I guess no matter what particular task we would have, we could see those different perspectives.
Sure. I think when we look at our vocations or our work tasks or whatever, I think that we have to appreciate the importance of bringing competence, the importance of bringing honesty and moral integrity. Sometimes we get a little pessimistic about life or about the world, and it seems to me that can be overcome or be set aside if there are enough people who approach these realities. We often read in the papers about things that have gone awry, and at the same time, I'm convinced there are just many people who carry on all these tasks, and it seems to me we can speak of them as the moral virtues, but they have managed to connect their faith and their values with what they do.
Do you remember the doctor in the burn unit, how he talked about it? He almost said that what he did there was like a secular liturgy to him, a worship kind of thing. And he talked about the importance of being with the other members of the healing team, I think as he called them, and praying together. And he talked about the importance of his parish, too, of having a place to go and get nourished and strengthened and challenged so that he could carry on this, what I took to be a most difficult kind of task of dealing with these burn victims.
Yeah. One of the surprises, I think, to me was that in a consultation which had as its title Society and Faith, Catholic Perspectives, that we spent as much time as we did on parish and liturgy. But I think all it did was reaffirm the importance of those values in regard to people wherever they are, however successful they happen to be. You're right, they kept coming back to that, and it just affirmed the importance of those familiar realities in very demanding lives.
It highlights the importance of linking liturgy and life. It's something that we're always talking about, that the liturgy, I think as you well said, is not something separate. The church life isn't separate, but it has to be integrated. We bring to the celebration of the Lord's Supper, to the worship service, what we are and what we're doing, all of our tasks. We find there that transforming power. The two have to go together. We are sent out from the liturgy then to carry on that same task. I'm thinking about the value of theology in all of this. One thing, you can see how the theological themes run through what we've been saying. Your whole point of not dichotomizing life, one of the great theological themes we've had lately is that idea of not splitting the sacred and the secular, of living in one graced world, of one spirit surrounding all of us, of God's love encompassing us, and so that there isn't some naturally good thing we do over here and some supernaturally good thing in church, but that those two things go together. That kind of theological understanding, I think, really helps us, and we probably have to keep coming back to that. It's one of the great advances, I think, of our own time.
Mm-hmm. Seems to be founded in the whole mystery of incarnation, that we've had in the past moments when things that were material or whatever were looked upon as being evil or bad, and spirit as being good. Whereas as we ponder the mystery of Jesus and the reality of taking flesh, it gives us a whole different sense of world, gives a whole different sense of self, gives us a whole different sense of our work, everything.
Doesn't it help when we think that Jesus is portrayed in Mark's gospel as the carpenter, not just the son of the carpenter, but the carpenter, the one who obviously worked with his hands himself. At the same time, I'm thinking of the limitations of theology, and this, I did an article for NCR recently where I think I was talking about some of these same matters, and one of the things that I was recognizing that call for a theology of work that you suggested, and I was saying that I'm not really sure that the people really wanted that. They did say that, I know. But I was thinking what we really need are more people to tell their story like the doctor did, and more people who are making a home someplace or working on the assembly line to say out loud to small groups in whatever ways how their faith influences their life there. I think that's what will touch people, if they're able to say, this is how it works for me, and to get together in small groups maybe and to talk about that. Strikes me then we would be in a position as theologians to grapple with that and see what the themes are there and what are the common elements. And I guess part of my sense is that theology of work that we jointly sketched out earlier is sort of sufficient. It's good. It's enough in a way to start with, so that everyone could sort of get on with the task and to find some way of relating their faith to their work.
It might have been a better consultation if we had Studs Terkel there, drawing out of the 60 participants their own particular story.
Yeah, from a faith perspective.
Because
maybe we need another book written from that perspective.
Because a good number of the people had the capacity to do the reflection back in regard to the faith experience.
They did, remarkably so, didn't they? They didn't really need a theologian to do that. They were able in some ways to do that for themselves.
And it was such a wonderful mix, all the way from the economist from Cornell and
the man from the Teachers College that you talked about. Bishop, I want to thank you for being on the program with me. I find it just stimulating to talk with you, and I think that so many people in our diocese have had that opportunity. You're in so many places and do such a good job of listening. I recommend people take that opportunity whenever they get it. I guess we've been talking a lot about the laity here and how we relate to them, especially the spirituality of the laity, in which we hope that they find their efforts in the world to build the kingdom to be satisfying, and in doing so, that they find a way to actualize themselves, that they come to greater fulfillment precisely because they're trying to live out the law of love in our world.
You've been listening to Reflections with your host, theologian Father James Basic, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo, Ohio. Joining Father Basic in this discussion was Bishop James Hoffman, the Bishop of the Diocese of Toledo. The topic of this week's Reflections was In Search of the Lay Spirituality. Comments or questions on this show or suggestions for future topics should be sent to Father James Basic, Catholic Campus Ministry, 2086 Brookdale Drive, Toledo, Ohio, 43606. Funding for this program was provided by the Catholic Communications Campaign of the Diocese of Toledo.